it's a lot of work. I think that reform, which is really the heart of my ministry, is a lot of work because it's about changing people's minds. It's about encouraging them to maybe surrender a former position in favor of another one that you present them with.
And I reckon it's not been easy.
It hasn't been, but very worthwhile. And I think that, you know, I think of my ministry as an internal organ. So if your internal organs are healthy, then you are better placed to be more productive, you know, going forward.
So how are they responding? Sorry.
How are they responding?
How are they responding to that?
I think that they are generally on notice. There's an awareness that, and I think His Excellency has done a great job in setting a new standard for Ogun State, changing the narrative. So there's a general awareness that it's not as it used to be or as business as usual. But I think that you know, change is difficult, and you know, I'm sure every one of us will admit that you know, forming new habits and doing things differently is not always the easiest thing to be done. But it's about encouragement. It's about quick wins. It's about you know, demonstrated success and the benefits of those successes, motivating us to continue a journey that is actually quite a difficult one.
You know, we talked about your ministry being like an internal organ. Now, for good internal organs, there are nerve endings that connect all of them.
You obviously studied biology. I did not.
Okay, no, I'm not going into biology. But then you also consider, you spoke about Ogun State being an industrial capital of the nation. You also called it an educational capital. But let's look at the question of infrastructure in terms of like roads, especially in the areas that you have called the industrial areas. Some like Ota, Igbesha, I hope I pronounced it well, and Aton. I don't know. But now the roads around connecting these areas are considered not good enough for the kind of infrastructure you want to bring in there. So what's the plan to make this go away real quick? I mean, with the limited resources you have and investors that you're calling in to come. You called them last year, you're calling them again this year, but your roads are not too good.
You're right. It's a challenge for us. To some extent, because of the system that we operate in Nigeria, you have, you know, federal roads and state roads, and the rights that we have, you know, what we can do in both of those roads. That there is a renewed conversation, I think, between state and federal governments about how to better come together to ensure that such infrastructure is not left unattended for extended periods of time. Roads are very expensive. And you know, when you're in an industrial area, if, for example, you know, a concrete road is more appropriate than a normal asphalt road, that's even more expensive. So it's really about understanding or figuring out a model that works. First of all, having the right to take responsibility for the road, and then figuring out a model that enables the massive resource that has to be plowed into developing the road network will be, you know, recovered. So you need to engage your stakeholders and be very transparent and say, look, this is something that is of mutual benefit. This is what it's going to take. In light of the framework within which we are operating, how do we make it happen? And those conversations between Ogun State and her stakeholders are quite advanced. So, you know, we are hopeful that in the near term, we'll begin to see some movement. I think not least because the federal government is also far more open to having conversations with states about roads that were previously exclusively federal roads.
Even while we talk about roads, we did highlight agriculture, where you explicitly made it clear on the efforts that you put in place to ensure that that sector of the economy of the state is encouraged to a large extent. But I'm also wondering what you have done in terms of having a microcredit financing system by the state that will help indigenous farmers, for instance, to be able to, you know, go fully into agriculture, and one that will have ROIs.
Well, first of all, I think that you know, agriculture and empowering rural, maybe small-scale farmers is a very holistic undertaking. You know, if you give people credit, for example, but they can't get their goods to market, because there's no roads in the rural areas, then it's almost like you're setting them up to fail. I think it's very important when you extend credit to do so in a well thought through manner. So credit for farmers is something that is on the cards, but it's not the most immediate intervention. We are very focused on developing the rural road network to the next level. Across Ogun State over the last 7 years, we've seen rather a lot of urban centre road development. Between now and sort of the end of this administration, the rural road network will definitely be a priority, both in terms of government expenditure directly and partnership with the World Bank. Ogun State is part of the RAMP program, RAMP 3, which is really about rural roads and access and mobility in the rural areas. And a lot of work has already been done. 500 roads have been identified within that program to ensure that the connectivity between rural farming areas and the towns and the cities that demand the produce are better connected, and that the farmers can better excavate their produce and bring it to market. Those things are at least as important as providing credit. I don't know if you've spoken to my colleague in agriculture yet, but I'm sure that when you do, she will tell you about some of the things that we're planning to strengthen the capacity of farmers in terms of extension workers and farming techniques, so that they can obtain a better yield on their efforts. Again, if you don't do those things and you simply extend credit, then it's almost burdening a situation that your intention is to help. So it's a very holistic plan that needs to be taken, not just looking at credit.
If I could come up with this one, I mean, you have a background in banking as well. Do you ever see this access to credit? No, not just access to credit. The interest rates. Do you ever see it getting into single digit at all in the nearest future?
Well, perhaps when the Honourable Minister of Finance sets the tone for us at the beginning of the conference, she'll touch on that. But the reality is that, and I think I referenced this earlier in the week, or last week, but the point is that one thing that needs to shift in Nigeria is the amount of funding that the government sources from the open market. Its references as crowding out. The rate at which government borrows is considered to be the risk-free rate, at least the rate at which they borrow in their own currency. Now, if owing to the way that the government debt profile is managed, you see a lot of activity in the government coming into the market to borrow, in the short end, then it's very difficult for rates to come down, because any other counterparty will be riskier than government. If I asked you to lend me 100 million naira and the government asked you to lend them 100 million naira, you'd be more comfortable probably lending to the government. So any rate that you're going to give me will be that rate plus. So until the rate at which government borrows comes down sustainably, then it's very difficult to see a sustained reduction in the interest rate.
I tell people not to hold your breath if they're thinking it's good to go down anytime soon.
It's a structural thing. Let's hope.
All right, we'll anchor at that point. We've been speaking with Adesina, the Commissioner for Budgets and Planning in Ogun State. And thank you for coming on. And all the best. We'll be back in a moment. It's not over yet, so don't go away.